At my wife's funeral, my daughter and her husband backed me into a corner. Sign everything over. You're too broken to handle this anymore. They thought grief had destroyed me, that I was easy prey. They were wrong. For 9 long weeks, I secretly recorded every word, every calculation, every cold plan to sell my house and put me away. When the estate announcement came and I pressed play, their own voices filled the room discussing how to divide my money. My daughter froze in pure shock. Then the phone started exploding. 123 missed calls. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Walter Harrison, 67 years old, Portland, Oregon. Spent 38 years as a forensic medical examiner for the county before I retired 3 years back. I used to believe that patience and careful observation could solve any problem. That cold, methodical approach served me well in my career, examining evidence, documenting facts, never jumping to conclusions. I thought I'd left that world behind when I hung up my badge. I was wrong. Let me tell you about my daughter, Kimberly, 38 years old, bright as a summer morning, with her mother's eyes and my stubborn streak. She wasn't always like this, cold, calculating, looking at me like I was already in the ground. I remember when she was 7, racing through our backyard on Hawthorne Boulevard, convinced she'd discovered a new constellation through my telescope. She'd made it up entirely, of course, but I never had the heart to correct her. That little girl with stars in her eyes grew up to become a financial analyst, with an MBA and a talent for spotting opportunities. These days, she spots them in all the wrong places. The change started about 5 years back when she married Troy Jenkins, 41 years old, entrepreneur type, the kind who calls himself a disruptor and wears expensive watches he can't quite afford yet. First time I met him, he had this way of shaking hands. Too firm, too long, maintaining eye contact like he'd read it in some business book. My examiner instincts kicked in immediately. In my line of work, you learn to spot the tells, the micro-expressions that don't quite match the words. Troy had them all. I watched my daughter transform over those 5 years. The weekly calls became monthly. Monthly became holidays only. When she did visit, her eyes would drift to the corners of rooms, calculating square footage, estimating values. Troy would compliment the house. Classic Portland architecture, Walter. These old places appreciate beautifully, but his tone made it sound like he was already planning the estate sale. Ellen, my wife of 42 years, saw it too. During her final months, when the cancer had spread to her bones and talking exhausted her, she'd squeeze my hand whenever Kimberly visited. 1 squeeze meant love. 2 meant warning. Towards the end, it was always 2. The funeral was set for a Thursday morning at Rose City Memorial. Gray September sky, the kind that makes Portland look like an old photograph. I stood in the parking lot in my one good suit, the same one I'd worn to my retirement party, watching people file in. Colleagues from my examiner days, neighbors, Ellen's book club ladies. And there, stepping out of a gleaming black Audi, were Kimberly and Troy. My daughter wore designer black that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Troy had his hand on her lower back, guiding her like she might stumble without him. They approached, and Kimberly hugged me. I felt her body tense, pulling away after exactly 3 seconds. Troy patted my shoulder twice, precise as a metronome. "Dad, how are you holding up?" Kimberly's voice had that careful modulation she used with difficult clients. "Managing," I said. "We need to talk," Troy interjected. "Before the service. Somewhere private." That should have been my first warning. Who demands a business meeting at a funeral? But grief makes you stupid. I followed them into a side room at the funeral home, one of those bland spaces with beige walls and sympathy cards pinned to a corkboard. Troy closed the door. The sound of that latch clicking shut. I'll remember it forever. Like a cell door, like a trap springing. "Walter, we're concerned." Troy pulled out a leather portfolio. Professional, prepared. "You're in no condition to handle Ellen's estate. The house, the finances, the legal complications, it's too much for someone in your state." My state? I heard my voice crack slightly. Exactly what they wanted. Kimberly moved closer, touching my arm. "Dad, you're grieving. You're not thinking clearly. Troy and I have consulted attorneys. We've prepared power of attorney documents and a quitclaim deed for the house. You just need to sign, and we'll take care of everything. She produced papers from the portfolio, real documents, notarized signatures ready, blank lines waiting for my name. They'd prepared this before Ellen was even in the ground. We'll handle all the financial stress, Troy continued, his voice smooth as oil. The property taxes on Hawthorne Boulevard alone are crushing. The investment accounts need active management. You're too broken to deal with this, Walter. Let us help. Too broken. The words hit like a physical blow. I stared at the papers, at my daughter's manicured fingernails tapping impatiently on the portfolio edge. The room felt smaller, airless. Through the walls, I could hear the funeral home director testing the microphone for the service. My hand reached for the pen Troy held out. I watched my fingers, steady hands that had performed thousands of autopsies, that had documented evidence in murder cases, that had held Ellen's hand through her final breath. I watched those hands shake. Troy smiled. That smile saved me. It was too quick, too satisfied. A predator that thinks its prey is already caught. And in that microsecond, 38 years of reading death scenes clicked into place. I saw them exchange a glance, quick, triumphant, thinking I wouldn't notice, but I notice everything. It's what I do. I need to think about this, I said, lowering my hand. Troy's jaw tightened. Walter, we don't have time. My wife's funeral starts in 15 minutes, I said quietly. We'll discuss this after. I walked out, leaving them standing there with their documents and their plans. As I passed through the door, I heard Troy hiss something to Kimberly. I didn't catch the words, but I caught the tone. Frustration, anger, not concern, not love, not grief, calculation. I stood in the chapel for the next hour, listening to people say beautiful things about Ellen, and all I could think about was that leather portfolio and my daughter's cold eyes. After the service, after the cemetery, after the reception at our house, where people ate sandwiches and told stories about Ellen, they all left, everyone except Kimberly and Troy. We're staying here, Kimberly announced, carrying 2 suitcases up to her old bedroom. You shouldn't be alone right now, Dad. I should have said no. Should have told them the only thing worse than being alone in an empty house was being watched in your own home. But I was tired, so tired. I nodded and retreated to my bedroom. The house felt wrong that night. I'd lived here since 1989, raised Kimberly in these rooms, built a life with Ellen between these walls. Now it felt like foreign territory. I could hear them downstairs, their voices low, discussing something, planning something. Sleep didn't come. Around 3 a.m, I got up, thinking I'd go to my study and look through my telescope. The stars always helped, constant, unchanging, honest. But as I passed Kimberly's old room, I heard them. Exactly like I said. He nearly signed right there. Troy's voice pleased. But he didn't. Kimberly anxious. What if he changes his mind? What if he gets suspicious? He won't. He's grieving. People in grief don't think straight. We just need to apply steady pressure. Kind pressure. Make him feel like signing over control is the compassionate thing to do. The investment accounts alone. $420,000. I checked. Combined with the house equity, we're looking at over $1 million. More than enough to cover our startup debts, and I stopped listening. I'd heard enough. I stood in that dark hallway in the house I'd bought with honest work, listening to my daughter and her husband catalog my assets like I was already dead. The strangest thing happened then. Instead of rage or heartbreak, I felt something else. Clarity. The same cold focus I'd had examining crime scenes. When you look at a body, you can't let emotion interfere. You document. You gather evidence. You build the case piece by piece. I returned to my bedroom, but not to sleep. I went to my closet and reached up to the top shelf, pulling down an old metal case. Inside was my field recorder from my examiner days, a Olympus digital voice recorder, professional grade. I'd used it to document findings at death scenes, capture observations, note details that might matter later in court. I checked the battery. Dead. Of course, but the charger was there, and by morning it would be ready. They wanted to prey on my grief. They wanted me broken and compliant. Fine. I'd give them exactly what they expected to see. A confused old man, overwhelmed by loss, struggling to cope. I'd play the role perfectly, but I'd document everything. Every word, every manipulation, every lie. In my career, I'd seen people do terrible things. Murder, betrayal, cruelty beyond imagination. I'd learned that the most dangerous predators are often the ones closest to the victim. The spouse with the insurance policy, the child impatient for inheritance, the trusted friend with debts to pay. I'd spent 38 years documenting those crimes. Now I'd document my own. I remembered a case from maybe 20 years back. A man named Richards, 73 years old, found dead in his home. Natural causes we'd ruled initially, heart attack, but his daughter had pushed for cremation immediately, before we'd finished toxicology. That delay, her insistence, her urgency, made me look closer. We found digitalis, overdose disguised as cardiac arrest. She'd been poisoning him slowly, stealing from his accounts. She thought she'd been careful, but the evidence never lies. I held the recorder in my hands, feeling its weight. Ellen would have understood. She'd always appreciated my thoroughness, my refusal to accept surface explanations. You see through things, she told me once during one of our late-night stargazing sessions. Most people look at the world. You look into it. That next morning, I came downstairs to find the kitchen table covered with papers, financial statements, property assessments, legal documents. Kimberly smiled at me, that careful, controlled smile. Dad, we made coffee. Come sit. Troy and I want to help you understand your financial situation. I shuffled to the table, let my hands shake slightly as I poured coffee. The recorder was in my cardigan pocket, running, red light hidden. It's overwhelming, isn't it? Troy began, spreading documents across the table. All these numbers, all these decisions. But that's why we're here. We can make this simple. Simple. They wanted to make stealing from me simple. I looked at my daughter, my little girl who'd once believed in imaginary constellations, and saw a stranger wearing her face. When had I lost her? Was it Troy's influence, or had something always been there, waiting for the right circumstances to emerge? I appreciate your concern, I said quietly, my voice deliberately uncertain, but I need time. Everything's happening so fast. Of course, Dad, Kimberly said, reaching across to pat my hand. Her touch was warm, but her eyes were calculating. We're not rushing you. We just want you to understand your options. Options? That's what they called it, as if signing away everything I'd worked for was an option rather than a trap. They stayed all that day and the next and the next. Just until you're stable, Kimberly insisted. But I understood. They weren't here to help. They were here to make sure I didn't slip away, didn't consult an attorney, didn't realize what they were really after. I played my part, confused, overwhelmed, grateful for their presence, and every night after they thought I'd gone to bed, I listened, I recorded, I documented. 3 days after the funeral, I heard them on the porch, thinking I was asleep upstairs. He's weakening, Troy said. Another week, maybe 2. Then we get the signatures. I feel guilty, Kimberly admitted. He's my father. He's had a good life. We're securing his future, making sure he's taken care of. By taking everything. By managing everything, there's a difference. I stood at my bedroom window, watching them through the glass. The recorder captured their conversation perfectly. In forensic work, we call it the chain of evidence. Each piece connects to the next, building an irrefutable case. You can't argue with recordings, with timestamps, with their own words used against them. Ellen used to say I had an astronomer's patience, that I could wait for the perfect moment, the right alignment, the exact time when everything clicked into place. She was right. Kimberly and Troy thought they were predators. They thought I was prey. They'd forgotten what I spent 38 years doing. I didn't just document death. I documented the truth that came after, the hidden violence, the careful crimes, the betrayals disguised as care. I knew how to wait, how to watch, how to build a case that no defense could crack. And I was just getting started. The first week was the hardest, not because of the grief, though that sat heavy in my chest like a stone, but because I had to become someone I wasn't, or rather someone I used to be before 38 years of discipline taught me to hide weakness. I shuffled. I hesitated. I stared at documents with my mouth slightly open, as if the words were written in a foreign language. When Troy explained something about property taxes, I'd ask him to repeat it. Then I'd ask again. I watched his jaw tighten with each repetition, watched the effort it took for him to maintain his patient tone. "Walter, do you understand what a quitclaim deed is?" he asked for the third time that morning. We were in the kitchen, my kitchen, and he was leaning against the counter like he owned it. "I think so," I said, letting my voice waver. "But maybe... Could you explain it once more?" The recorder in my cardigan pocket caught everything. His sigh, the pause before he answered, the slight edge creeping into his voice. "It transfers property ownership," he said slowly, like I was a child. "From you to us, for your protection." "My protection?" I nodded, looking confused, and asked about taxes again. Behind him, Kimberly closed her eyes briefly. Frustration or guilt, hard to tell. Didn't matter. I was collecting data. What fascinated me most was watching them perform. They'd rehearsed this, clearly. Good cop, bad cop, except they were both bad cops wearing good cop masks. Kimberly would start conversations with, "Dad, I'm worried about you," while Troy would interject with practical solutions that all involved me signing away control. They'd pivot between concern and pressure so smoothly, you'd almost miss the manipulation. Almost. That second week, I started noticing smaller things. The way Troy would open my mail before I saw it. How Kimberly had taken over, answering my phone. "Dad's resting. Can I take a message?" The way they'd glance at each other when I left the room. Entire conversations happening in those looks. One afternoon, I came downstairs earlier than expected. They were at the dining table with a laptop, spreadsheet visible. Troy minimized it quickly, but not quickly enough. I'd seen the header. W. Harrison Estate Liquidation Plan. "What was that?" I asked, shuffling forward. "Just some work stuff," Troy said, closing the laptop completely. "Boring financial projections." "For your startup?" I let my voice sound vaguely interested, harmlessly curious. "Exactly," Kimberly jumped in. "We're expanding the business model. Troy's been working on investor presentations." I nodded slowly, pretending to believe them. The recorder caught it all. The lie, the quick cover, the seamless tag-team deflection. In my career, I'd learned that liars always give you more information than necessary. Honest people answer the question asked. Liars build elaborate explanations. They stayed for another 3 weeks, 21 days of performance art. I learned their patterns. Troy was aggressive in the mornings. That's when he'd push hardest about signing documents. Kimberly was more effective in the evenings when exhaustion made me seem more vulnerable. She'd sit beside me on the couch, hold my hand, talk about how much her mother would want me to be safe, using Ellen's memory as leverage. That was when I knew there was nothing left of my daughter worth saving. Or maybe there was, buried somewhere deep. But Troy had built walls around it so thick she couldn't find her way out. The recorder captured it all. Their whispered conversations when they thought I was asleep. Their phone calls taken in the backyard. The night Troy got frustrated and said, "How long are we supposed to babysit him? He's going to sign eventually, or we'll find another way." Another way. I didn't like the sound of that. Time to move from passive documentation to active preparation. 3 weeks in, I told them I needed to run errands. Prescriptions, I explained vaguely, and some supplies. Kimberly immediately offered to drive me. Of course she did. Can't let the confused old man wander Portland alone. "I'll manage," I said, mustering what I hoped looked like stubborn independence. "I need some air, some time to think." They exchanged one of those looks. Troy nodded slightly. "Let him have this small freedom," the look said. "Keep him feeling independent while we tighten the noose." "Take your phone," Kimberly said, helping me into my jacket like I was infirm. "Call if you need anything." I drove my old Honda Civic, 30 years old but well-maintained, to a coffee shop on the east side of Portland. Stumptown Coffee, tucked away in a neighborhood Troy and Kimberly wouldn't think to check. I'd called ahead the previous day from my study, using the landline while they were out grocery shopping. Stephen Carter sat at a corner table. Mid-50s, notary public, ran a small business handling estate documents. We'd worked together years back on a case involving forged signatures. Not friends exactly, but professionals who respected each other's work. "Walter," he said, standing to shake my hand. Normal grip. Normal duration. It felt absurdly refreshing. I was sorry to hear about Ellen. "Thank you." I sat across from him, grateful to drop the confused old man act for an hour. I need your professional opinion on something. I explained the situation, just the facts, the way I'd learned to present evidence in court. Daughter and son-in-law pressuring me to sign documents. The timing, the behavior, the million-dollar question. Was this legal elder coercion? Stephen listened, taking occasional notes. When I finished, he sat back. The documents themselves might be legal, he said carefully. Power of attorney, quitclaim deeds. Those are standard estate planning tools. The problem is context. Timing. Pressure applied to someone in grief. Oregon has strong elder abuse laws, including financial exploitation statutes. If you can prove undue influence, I can prove it, I said, pulling out the recorder. I've been documenting everything. His eyebrows rose. Recording without consent? Oregon's a one-party consent state, so that's legal as long as you're part of the conversation. But Walter, this is your daughter. I know who she is. My voice came out harder than intended. I also know what she's trying to do. The question is, what are my options? Stephen outlined them. Option 1, sign nothing, tell them to leave, hope they go peacefully. Option 2, consult an attorney about protective orders. Option 3, and he smiled slightly here, option 3 was more creative. You build a case, he said. Document everything, consult an attorney, prepare ironclad estate documents they can't challenge. Then you reveal what you know at a strategic moment. Maximum impact. Minimal chance of successful counterattack. I liked option 3. We talked for another 40 minutes. He gave me the name of an attorney. Gerald Martinez, estate law specialist. Offices downtown. Not someone I knew, which was perfect. The fewer connections to my old life, the better. One more thing, Stephen said as I stood to leave. Whatever you're planning, make sure it's legal. Don't let your anger push you into anything that could backfire. I spent 38 years working within the law, I said. I'm not about to stop now. Driving home, I felt something shift inside me. The victim role was becoming easier to shed. Underneath it, something else was emerging. Something patient and cold and very, very focused. Troy and Kimberly were waiting when I got back. How was your errand? Kimberly asked, scanning my hands. Empty. No pharmacy bag. Fine, I said vaguely. I forgot the prescription. I'll go back tomorrow. We could have handled that for you, Dad. I know. But I need to do some things myself. Can't have you taking care of everything. Not yet, anyway. Not ever, actually. But they didn't need to know that. That night, I heard them arguing. Quietly, but the walls in old houses carry sound. Troy thought I was getting suspicious. Kimberly insisted I was just stubborn. They decided to increase pressure. Time to bring in their attorney, make everything seem official and unavoidable. Perfect. Let them push harder. Every push would be documented. Every lie recorded. Every manipulation preserved on digital audio with timestamps and crystal clarity. I lay in bed, listening to them plot, and realized I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires heat. This was colder. This was the same detachment I'd felt standing over bodies, examining evidence, building cases. The emotions could wait. Right now, I had work to do. 9 weeks the plan would take. 9 weeks to gather enough evidence, prepare my legal defense, set the stage for revelation. 9 weeks to transform from victim to prosecutor. I'd waited decades for autopsy results. I could wait 9 weeks for justice. 4 weeks after the funeral, Troy found my investment account statements. I'd left them in the study, not quite hidden, but not quite visible. A little test. I wanted to see how far they'd go, whether they'd respect boundaries or blow right through them. The study was my space, had been for 30 years. Ellen never went through my papers. Kimberly knew that, didn't stop her husband. I came back from the bathroom to find Troy standing at my desk, holding the quarterly statement from my brokerage firm. His face had gone very still. That particular kind of stillness that comes when someone sees exactly what they've been hoping for. $420,000 in investments, mutual funds, some bonds, the savings of a careful life lived within means. Walter, his voice was casual, but his pupils had dilated. I didn't realize you had this much in investments. Ellen and I saved, I said simply, not moving from the doorway. Part of me, the old me, the pre-examiner me, wanted to ask what he was doing going through my desk. But the new me, the one building a case, just watched and recorded. The recorder was in my pocket, always in my pocket now. This is significant capital, Troy continued, setting the statement down carefully. Too carefully. In this market, it needs active management. Have you reviewed your portfolio allocation recently? The risk exposure? I shuffled forward, playing my role. The financial advisor handles that. He calls every few months. Which firm? I named them. Troy nodded, his mind clearly spinning. I could almost see the calculations happening behind his eyes. House worth $680,000. Investments $420,000. Over $1 million in total assets. Enough to save their failing startup and then some. That night, they staged an intervention. We sat in the living room, my living room, bought with money I'd earned examining the dead while they were still in high school. Kimberly had been crying, real tears which surprised me. Maybe there was still a piece of her that felt guilty about this. Dad, we need to talk seriously. She was holding my hand. Her skin was warm. Troy and I are worried about your financial security. Your portfolio is heavily weighted toward equities, Troy added, pulling out printed charts he'd somehow prepared in the last 6 hours. Fast work, desperate work. If the market corrects, you could lose 30%, maybe more. Has your advisor discussed risk mitigation strategies? Kimberly asked. Asset protection trusts? Tax advantage transfers? They took turns. A polished performance. Financial terms deployed like weapons. Complexity used as confusion. The message underneath all the jargon. Sign it over to us, and we'll keep it safe. I don't know, I said, letting my voice crack. Perfect, confused old man. This is all so complicated. I just want to keep things simple. That's exactly what we want too, Troy said, leaning forward. His intensity was remarkable, predatory. Simple, secure, protected. We've consulted with an attorney about establishing a living trust. You'd be the beneficiary, of course, but we'd handle the management, the decisions, the stress. We already spoke to someone, Kimberly added quickly, just to explore options. They said with proper structure, the estate tax burden could be minimal. Everything protected, everything simple. My hand was shaking, not because I was afraid, because it took effort not to laugh. They'd already consulted an attorney, already planned the structure. All that was missing was my signature. I need to think about it, I said. Of course, Kimberly soothed. Take your time. But Dad, at your age, with your assets, every day you wait is a day of unnecessary risk. My age, my assets, like I was already incapable, already gone. The recorder captured everything. After they went to bed, exhausted from their performance, no doubt, I sat in the kitchen and played the recording back. Their voices sounded different through the speaker, harsher, the manipulation more obvious without the live performance to distract. The next morning, I told them I had an appointment downtown. Estate lawyer, I explained. You're right. I should get professional advice. They couldn't argue with that without revealing their hand. Troy offered to come along. For support, he said. I'll manage, I replied. This is something I need to do myself. I watched suspicion flicker across his face, quickly suppressed. Let him wonder. Let him worry. The predator was becoming prey, and he was starting to sense it. Gerald Martinez's office was on the 5th floor of a building near Pioneer Square. Professional, established, the kind of place that handles serious money and serious problems with equal discretion. Martinez himself was 55, methodical, with the careful manner of someone who'd seen too many family disputes turn ugly. We sat in his conference room, and I laid it out. The full story, the recordings, the documents they wanted me to sign, my concerns. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Harrison, what exactly do you want to accomplish here? Good question. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Protection? I want them to understand there are consequences, I said slowly. I want my assets protected, and I want it done in a way that's legally unassailable. Martinez nodded. Oregon has strong statutes regarding elder financial abuse, undue influence, exploitation of diminished capacity, though you're clearly not diminished. The recordings help establish pattern and intent. But here's what concerns me. He leaned forward. If you reveal this to them directly, it could escalate. They might contest any estate documents, claim you were coerced in the other direction, tie everything up in litigation for years. What we need is a strategy that protects you and removes their incentive to fight. I'm listening. We spent 2 hours working through options. Martinez explained the legal framework. In Oregon, I could create an irrevocable trust with specific beneficiaries. I could establish healthcare directives that prevented them from making medical decisions. I could document their attempted coercion and file it with the court, not as charges, but as protective record. What about revealing what they've done? I asked, making them face it. Martinez smiled slightly. That's where it gets interesting. If you want maximum impact, minimum legal risk, you do it in a controlled setting. Witnesses, official capacity. Make it part of a formal estate proceeding where everything's on the record. Like reading a will. Exactly like that. Except you're not dead, so it's more of an estate planning announcement. You invite them, maybe some other family members for a perspective, and you present your decisions, including the recordings that influence those decisions. I like this man's thinking. We discussed specifics. Timeline, documentation, witnesses. Martinez would prepare the actual trust documents, legitimate ones that actually protected my interests, not the trap Kimberly and Troy had been laying. One thing, Martinez said as I stood to leave. Your daughter. Is there any chance she's acting under pressure from her husband, that she might be redeemable? I thought about Ellen's hand squeezes. 2 for warning. Always 2, at the end. Maybe once, I said. Not anymore. The walk back to my car felt different, lighter. I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was preparing. Building not just evidence, but strategy. The pieces were coming together like they had in my best cases, the complex ones that seemed impossible until suddenly they weren't. Troy and Kimberly were waiting when I got home. How did it go? Kimberly asked immediately. Fine, I said vaguely. He's drawing up some papers. I'll review them next week. What kind of papers? Troy's voice was sharp. Estate documents, like you suggested. I looked at him blandly. Why? Just curious. We want to make sure you're getting good advice. Oh, he seems very knowledgeable. He talked about trusts and beneficiaries, and I let my voice trail off into confusion. It's all very complicated. I watched them exchange glances, concerned, suspicious. Hard to tell. Didn't matter. They were still playing their game, not realizing I'd changed the rules. That night, I heard them through the walls again. He's actually consulting an attorney, Troy said. That's good. Makes him look competent when we eventually need to establish the trust. But what if the attorney warns him about us? Kimberly worried. About what? We're concerned family members. We haven't done anything wrong. Yet. The word hung in the air, unspoken but present. Weeks 5 through 7 passed in a careful dance. They pushed, I deflected. They suggested. I agreed to think about it. The recorder kept running. The evidence kept mounting. Martinez prepared documents. I visited him twice more, always careful, always watching for tails. By week 7, Troy was getting impatient. I'd catch him staring at me sometimes, calculating, wondering if the confused old man act was exactly that, an act. But he couldn't quite believe it. His ego wouldn't let him. Week 8, Kimberly found me in the study, looking through the telescope. She stood beside me for a long moment. What are you looking at? She asked quietly. Saturn, I said. The rings are visible tonight. They're beautiful, constant, unlike most things. Dad, she started, then stopped. For just a moment, I thought I saw the little girl who used to make up constellations. Then Troy called from downstairs, and she was gone again. Week 9. Everything was in place. Martinez had the documents. The recordings were cataloged, backed up, stored in 3 separate locations. The stage was set. I called Troy and Kimberly into the living room. I've decided, I told them. You're right. It's time to formalize things. I've asked my attorney to schedule a family meeting next week to go over the estate plan and make everything official. They actually smiled, triumphant, relieved. They thought they'd won. That's wonderful, Dad, Kimberly said. I'm so proud of you for taking this step. Martinez suggested inviting some extended family, I continued casually. He said it's better to have witnesses for these kinds of proceedings. I thought we might ask Troy's parents. They're family too, after all. Troy's smile faltered slightly. My parents? Is that necessary? Martinez thought it was a good idea. Makes everything more official. More, I let the smile touch my lips, legitimate. And that's when I understood how to repay them. Not with anger, not with confrontation, but with the same tool I'd used my entire career. Documentation, evidence, truth presented at exactly the right moment to exactly the right audience. They thought they were coming to watch me surrender. They had no idea what they were walking into. The week before the meeting passed in a strange limbo. Troy and Kimberly moved through the house with barely contained excitement. They thought they were weeks away from controlling everything. The house, the investments, my life. They'd already started making plans. I overheard them in the kitchen 3 days before the scheduled meeting. They were looking at real estate websites on Troy's laptop. 680,000 is the listing estimate, Troy said, but in this market, we could push for 700, maybe more if we stage it right. It feels wrong to talk about this while Dad's still living here, Kimberly said, but her voice lacked conviction. He'll be better off in assisted living anyway. Smaller space, less maintenance. People his own age. It's actually the compassionate choice. Compassionate. That word again. They'd weaponized kindness, turned concern into cover for theft. The recorder caught every word. That same afternoon, I met Martinez one final time at his office. The documents were ready. Actual legal instruments that protected my interests, not the predatory trap Troy and Kimberly had prepared. The trust is ironclad, Martinez explained, sliding papers across his desk. Primary beneficiary is the Cancer Research Foundation you specified. Secondary beneficiary, your daughter, gets $50,000 conditional on completing therapy and demonstrating, quote, meaningful personal growth and reconciliation. And if she contests it, she can try. But with the recordings, the documented timeline of manipulation, and the fact that you're clearly of sound mind, she'd lose badly. And legal fees would eat whatever she might gain. What about Troy's parents? I asked. You've confirmed they're coming? Martinez nodded. Contacted them yesterday. Donald and Patricia Jenkins. I explained we were having a family estate planning meeting and that their son requested their presence. They seemed surprised, but agreed. They don't know about the recordings. No one does except us. They think this is a standard formalization. Troy and Kimberly think they're about to inherit a fortune, and Donald and Patricia think they're supporting their son in helping you. The setup was perfect. Everyone arriving with different expectations. Everyone about to discover the truth simultaneously. One more thing, I said, pulling the digital recorder from my pocket. I want to play this during the meeting. Is that legally permissible? Martinez examined the device. In Oregon, absolutely. One-party consent state. You were part of every conversation recorded. It's admissible as evidence if this ever goes to court. In a private estate meeting, nothing stopping you. Good. I pocketed the recorder. It felt heavier now, weighted with 9 weeks of betrayal compressed into digital files. I want them to hear themselves. I want them to understand exactly what they did. Martinez studied me for a moment. Mr. Harrison, I've handled a lot of family estate cases. Most people in your position would just quietly protect their assets and move on. Why the theatrical revelation? Because they need to face it, I said simply. Troy needs to answer to his parents. Kimberly needs to hear her own voice saying those things, and I need them to know I wasn't the confused old man they thought I was. Fair enough, Martinez smiled slightly. I'll have everything ready. Conference room's booked for 2 o'clock. Should take about an hour, assuming no one storms out. Oh, someone will probably storm out, I said, but they'll hear the recordings first. Driving home, I felt oddly calm. No nervousness, no doubt. Just the same cold certainty I'd felt hundreds of times before announcing findings in criminal cases. The evidence was solid. The case was airtight. All that remained was presentation. Troy and Kimberly were cooking dinner when I arrived. Actually cooking. Kimberly was chopping vegetables while Troy stirred something on the stove. Playing house, playing family, as if the last 9 weeks of manipulation could be erased by a home-cooked meal. Dad, Kimberly's smile was bright, we're making your favorite, pot roast with vegetables. That's thoughtful, I said, hanging my coat. We wanted to celebrate, Troy added, not looking up from the stove. Tuesday's the big day. Everything finalized. We thought we'd make it special. Special. They were celebrating my surrender. Martinez confirmed the time, I said carefully. 2:00. My estate attorney will present the documents for signature. And my parents are coming? Troy's tone suggested he still wasn't thrilled about that detail. Family witnesses, Martinez insisted. He said it adds legitimacy to the proceedings. I smiled blandly. You don't mind, do you? No, of course not. But his jaw tightened. We ate dinner in artificial normalcy. They asked about my day. I gave vague answers. They talked about their business plans, expansion strategies, market opportunities. They spoke carefully, never quite saying after we sell the house or once we control the assets, but the implications hung in every sentence. That night, lying in bed, I listened to their final planning session through the wall. Tuesday afternoon, everything changes, Troy said. We'll have power of attorney, the trust established, control of the assets. The startup debt gets cleared, and we have operating capital for expansion. What about the house? Kimberly asked. We'll wait a respectful amount of time, maybe a month. Then we suggest assisted living. He won't fight it. He'll be grateful we're handling everything. I still feel guilty sometimes. Don't. We're helping him. He can't manage alone. We're doing this for his own good. I lay there in the darkness, the recorder on my nightstand capturing everything through the thin wall. 9 weeks of this. 9 weeks of listening to them rationalize theft as compassion, greed as care. The day before the meeting, I drove to the astronomy club. I hadn't been since Ellen died, but I needed normalcy, needed to look through a telescope at something constant and true. Marcus, the club president, a retired aerospace engineer, was adjusting the main telescope when I arrived. Walter, he clasped my shoulder. Haven't seen you in months. How are you holding up? Managing, I said. The word felt automatic now. I was sorry to hear about Ellen. She was a wonderful woman. Yes. I moved to the telescope, grateful for the distraction. What are we looking at tonight? Jupiter. The great red spot should be visible in about an hour. We talked about orbits and atmospheric patterns. Clean, simple physics. No manipulation, no lies. Just mathematical certainty and the patient observation of distant worlds. You seem different, Marcus said after a while. Calmer, somehow. Is everything okay? It will be, I said, after tomorrow. I didn't elaborate. Marcus didn't push. That was the thing about astronomers. We understood patience, understood waiting for the right moment, when everything aligned. That night, my last night with Kimberly and Troy in the house, I made a final recording. Not of them, of myself. This is Walter Harrison, recording statement for the record, I said quietly into the device. 9 weeks ago, my daughter and son-in-law attempted to coerce me into signing away my assets while I was grieving. What follows is documentation of their systematic manipulation, their planned exploitation, and their complete disregard for my well-being. Tomorrow, they'll hear this. All of it, and they'll understand that I was never the broken old man they thought I was. I was just an examiner, doing what I've always done, documenting the truth. I turned off the recorder and placed it in my jacket pocket. In 12 hours, I'd press play, and 9 weeks of careful observation would become 9 weeks of undeniable evidence. I slept better that night than I had since Ellen died. December in Portland always feels like the city is holding its breath. Gray sky, cold air, the possibility of snow that never quite materializes. That Tuesday morning matched my mood, calm, expectant, ready. Troy and Kimberly were already up when I came downstairs. They'd dressed carefully. Troy in a suit that actually fit, probably bought for this occasion. Kimberly in a professional dress, her hair done, makeup perfect. They looked like successful people about to sign important papers. They looked like they'd already won. Morning, Dad, Kimberly said, pouring coffee. Big day. Yes, I took the cup. My hands were steady. Thank you. We'll drive downtown together, Troy offered. No point taking separate cars. Actually, I'd prefer to meet you there. I have an errand first. His eyes narrowed slightly. What kind of errand? Just something I need to handle. I'll be at Martinez's office by 2. You'll be there? Of course, but I saw the flicker of concern. After 9 weeks of controlling my movements, the idea of me running an unsupervised errand made him nervous. Good. My errand was simple. I drove to a coffee shop, sat alone, and reviewed my recordings one final time. Not because I needed to verify anything, I knew every word, but because I wanted to hear them with fresh ears before making them public. Troy's voice, he's too broken to deal with this. Kimberly's voice, we'll have control of the assets. Troy again, the old man's weakening. Kimberly, what if he gets suspicious? Troy, he won't. He's grieving. He's not thinking straight. 9 weeks. Dozens of conversations, hundreds of manipulative phrases, all captured with timestamp precision. At 1:45, I drove to Martinez's office building. The recorder was in my jacket pocket. Heavy, solid, ready. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt longer than usual. My reflection in the polished metal doors showed a 67-year-old man in his one good suit. Gray hair, weathered face, the kind of person you might underestimate. They'd made that mistake. Martinez's receptionist directed me to the conference room. The others are already here, Mr. Harrison. I walked in and stopped. The room was larger than I expected. A polished oak table surrounded by leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Portland. And sitting around that table, Kimberly and Troy on one side, Troy's parents, Donald and Patricia Jenkins on the other. Martinez at the head, papers arranged precisely in front of him. 4 faces turned toward me as I entered. Troy looked confident. Kimberly looked nervous but hopeful. Donald Jenkins looked vaguely curious, a man in his 60s with Troy's features and a successful businessman's bearing. Patricia looked kind, worried, the way mothers do when they're not quite sure what's happening. "Walter, come in," Martinez said formally. "Please sit." I took the chair at the opposite end of the table from Martinez, facing everyone. The recorder felt like a brick in my pocket. "Thank you all for coming," Martinez began. "We're here today to formalize Mr. Harrison's estate planning decisions. As you know, following the recent loss of his wife, Mr. Harrison has been reviewing his financial affairs and making important decisions about asset distribution and management." Troy leaned forward slightly, his posture that of a man about to close a deal. "However," Martinez continued, "before we proceed with the formal documents, Mr. Harrison has requested that we all hear some relevant context. Walter?" This was it. The moment. 9 weeks building to this single point. I pulled the recorder from my pocket and placed it on the table. Small, unassuming, devastating. Kimberly's eyes fixed on it. Recognition flickered across her face. She'd seen me with it before, I realized. In the house. She'd thought it was just an old man holding on to outdated technology. "Before we discuss my estate," I said quietly, "I want everyone to hear something. 9 weeks ago, at my wife's funeral, my daughter and son-in-law cornered me and tried to force me to sign away control of my assets. What you're about to hear is what happened afterward." Troy's expression shifted. The confidence cracked slightly. "Walter, what are you—" "Let him finish," Martinez said firmly. I pressed play. My voice first, from that morning after the funeral. "I appreciate your concern, but I need time." Then Troy's voice, clear and sharp through the speaker. "Time? Walter, we don't have time. You're not thinking straight. You need to let us handle this." Kimberly's voice, the fake concern perfectly preserved. "Dad, you're too broken to deal with financial decisions right now." Patricia Jenkins made a small sound. Donald's face went very still. The recording continued. Snippets from different days, different conversations, all cataloged, all damning. The investment accounts alone, $420,000. Combined with the house equity, we're looking at over $1 million. He's weakening, another week, maybe 2. Then we get the signatures. We need to make him feel like signing over control is the compassionate thing to do. Troy's face had gone from confident to pale to something approaching panic. He reached for the recorder, an instinctive move to stop this, to silence it. Martinez's hand caught his wrist. "Sit down, Mr. Jenkins. This is taken out of context. He's manipulating the situation." "Sit down." Troy sat, but his leg was bouncing. Nervous energy, trapped animal energy. The recording kept playing. "Once we have power of attorney, the trust established, Control of the assets. The startup debt gets cleared. What about the house? We'll wait a respectful amount of time, maybe a month, then we suggest assisted living. Kimberly had gone absolutely white. Not pale, white, the color of paper. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles sharp. Her mouth opened, then closed. No words came out. I watched her face like I'd watched thousands of crime scenes, clinically, observing every detail, the shock, the horror, the dawning realization that every private conversation had been documented, every manipulation captured, every lie preserved forever. Donald Jenkins stood abruptly, his chair scraped backward. He was staring at his son with an expression I recognized from my work, the look of someone discovering that someone they loved was capable of terrible things. Troy. His voice was very quiet, very controlled. Tell me I didn't just hear you planning to exploit an elderly man's grief to steal his assets. Dad, it's not. We were trying to help. Help? Patricia's voice broke. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. You called him broken. You calculated his net worth while planning his wife's assisted living placement. That's not help. That's... She couldn't finish, couldn't name what it was, but I could. I stopped the recording. The silence was profound. 9 weeks of evidence compressed into 15 minutes of audio. 15 minutes that changed everything. I spent 38 years as a forensic medical examiner, I said into that silence. I documented death scenes, crime scenes. I learned that the evidence always tells the truth. The body never lies. I looked at Kimberly. Neither does a recording. My daughter couldn't meet my eyes. She was staring at her hands, trembling slightly, a trapped feeling coming off her in waves. Troy tried one more time. This is entrapment. You set us up. I documented attempted elder financial abuse, I corrected. In Oregon, that's a felony. Recording conversations I was part of. Perfectly legal. One-party consent state. I glanced at Martinez. Isn't that right? Completely legal, Martinez confirmed, and admissible as evidence if Mr. Harrison chose to pursue criminal charges. The word criminal hit Troy like a physical blow. His confident businessman mask shattered completely. Underneath was something desperate and small. Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, Martinez continued, addressing Troy's parents, I want you to understand that you're here as witnesses to Mr. Harrison's actual estate planning, not the predatory scheme your son and daughter-in-law attempted. You'll be confirming that Mr. Harrison is of sound mind and made his decisions freely. Donald nodded slowly, still staring at Troy with that awful expression, love mixed with disgust, mixed with disappointment, all three at once. The actual trust, Martinez said, opening a folder, designates the majority of Mr. Harrison's estate to a cancer research foundation in his late wife's name. A conditional amount of $50,000 is allocated to his daughter, conditional on demonstrated personal growth and family reconciliation. Kimberly's head snapped up. 50,000? But the house, the investments, will benefit cancer research, I said, like Ellen would have wanted, like I want. My decision, my assets, my choice. The room felt smaller suddenly, compressed. Troy was breathing hard, his careful plans disintegrating. Kimberly looked like she might be sick, and Donald Jenkins was already standing, buttoning his coat, looking at his son with cold finality. Patricia, he said quietly, we're leaving. Donald, Dad, wait. Troy stood, reaching out, but Donald was already at the door. He paused, turned, looked at his son one final time. We'll discuss your business loan later, he said. The words were ice. All of it. The door closed behind them. In the silence that followed, I heard Kimberly start to cry. Not fake tears, real ones. The sound of someone watching their carefully constructed world collapse. Troy's phone buzzed, then again, then continuously. He pulled it out, stared at the screen. His face went even paler. It's my dad, he said hoarsely. 17 missed calls already. Not quite the 123 I'd eventually get from Kimberly, but it was a start. I sat back in my chair, the recorder still on the table between us. 9 weeks of patience, 9 weeks of documentation, 9 weeks of playing the broken old man while building an unbreakable case. And now, watching them face the consequences, I felt something I hadn't felt since Ellen died. Peace. I believe we have signatures to collect, Martinez said, pushing documents forward. Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, would you please witness these estate documents? But Troy and Kimberly were already moving toward the door, running from the truth they couldn't argue with, the evidence they couldn't deny, the evidence that had spoken exactly when it needed to, in exactly the right voice, their own. The door closed behind Troy and Kimberly, leaving me alone with Martinez in his conference room. Through the window I could see December clouds gathering over Portland, the same gray sky that had hung over Ellen's funeral 9 weeks ago. 9 weeks. That's how long it took to document a betrayal and turn it into justice. Martinez began organizing his papers, methodical and professional. That went about as expected, he said, though I admit, hearing those recordings in context, it's worse than I imagined. Reality usually is, I said. The recorder still sat on the table between us. Small device. Enormous impact. Donald and Patricia will likely cut off their son's funding completely, Martinez continued. The business loan he mentioned, $180,000, that's substantial leverage. If they demand immediate repayment, his startup collapses, I finished, along with any chance of covering the $340,000 in existing debt. Martinez looked at me with something approaching respect. You knew all the numbers. I'm an examiner. I always know the numbers. I picked up the recorder, feeling its weight. Every conversation I recorded included financial details. The debts, the plans, the calculations. I built a complete picture. They'll try to fight back, Martinez warned. People like Troy don't accept defeat easily. He'll look for angles, maybe claim you manipulated them, or that the recordings are somehow fraudulent. Let him try. I stood, tucking the recorder back into my pocket. The timestamps are verifiable. The metadata is intact, and Oregon law is clear. One-party consent. Everything I did was legal. What about Kimberly? Martinez asked quietly. Your daughter. Do you think there's any chance that she'll accept the conditional $50,000 and work on herself? I considered it. Maybe. Or maybe she'll choose Troy in resentment. Either way, I've done what I can. The door's open if she wants to walk through it, but I won't be manipulated again. Martinez nodded. The trust documents are filed. The Cancer Research Foundation will be notified. Your estate is protected, and the recordings are on file as evidence of attempted elder financial abuse, should you choose to pursue charges. I won't, I said, unless they force my hand. The exposure is punishment enough. Having his parents know what he tried to do, that's worse than any legal consequence for Troy. I left Martinez's office and rode the elevator down to street level. My phone had been buzzing throughout the meeting, but I'd kept it silenced. Now, standing on the sidewalk, I checked it. 23 missed calls, all from Kimberly. Not 123 yet, but give it time. I drove home slowly through Portland streets decorated for Christmas. Lights strung between buildings, wreaths on doors, the whole city preparing for celebration while my family collapsed under the weight of their own greed. The house on Hawthorne Boulevard felt different when I walked in, lighter somehow. For 9 weeks, Troy and Kimberly had filled these rooms with their presence, their plotting, their calculations. Now the silence was clean. Mine again. I went to my study, to the telescope. Saturn was rising early tonight. I adjusted the lens, found the planet, watched the rings rotate in perfect mathematical precision. Constant, reliable, true. My phone rang, Kimberly again. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. On the 5th call, I answered. Dad! Her voice was ragged. She'd been crying. Dad, please. We need to talk. I can explain. I don't think there's anything to explain, Kimberly. I have 9 weeks of recordings. Everything's already been said. But you don't understand. Troy, the business. We were desperate. I understand desperation, I said quietly. I watched your mother die over 2 years. I understand grief. I understand pressure. What I don't understand is using those things as weapons against someone who loves you. Silence on the line. Then, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted... You never wanted to get caught, I corrected. There's a difference. That's not fair. Fair? The word came out harder than intended. You ambushed me at your mother's funeral. You moved into my house to control me. You planned to sell my home and put me in assisted living so you could clear your debts. And you think I'm being unfair? More silence, then quieter. What happens now? That depends on you. Martinez outlined the conditions. Therapy, personal growth, reconciliation. If you meet them, there's $50,000 waiting. If not, I shrugged, though she couldn't see it. If not, the money goes to cancer research too. Either way, I'm at peace. 50,000 won't even cover a quarter of our debts. Then I suggest you figure something else out, like adults do, like I did when I was your age and starting out. Dad, I need to go, Kimberly. I have nothing more to say right now. I hung up. The phone immediately started ringing again. I turned it off completely. That evening, I made dinner. Simple food, pasta, salad, bread. I ate at the kitchen table, the same table where Troy had spread his fake financial projections weeks ago, where Kimberly had served me coffee while plotting to take everything. The house was quiet, peaceful, mine. My phone stayed off for 2 days. When I finally turned it on, I had 107 missed calls, 73 from Kimberly, 28 from Troy, 6 from numbers I didn't recognize, and 1 voicemail from Donald Jenkins. Mr. Harrison, this is Donald, Troy's father. I wanted to apologize. For my son. For not seeing what he was capable of. Patricia and I are horrified. Absolutely horrified. We've cut off all financial support to their business. They have 1 year to repay what we've already given them, or we'll pursue legal action. I wanted you to know that. And I wanted to say what you did, documenting everything, protecting yourself, that took remarkable clarity and strength. Ellen would have been proud, I hope. I hope someday we can speak again, under better circumstances. Take care of yourself. I saved the message. Donald Jenkins was a decent man who'd raised an indecent son. That happens sometimes. The children you thought you knew became strangers. I called Martinez the next morning. How's the fallout? He asked. Extensive, I said. Over 100 missed calls. Kimberly wants to negotiate. Troy's probably trying to figure out if he can sue me for something. His father cut them off financially. Good. And the recordings are secure? 3 backup locations plus the originals with you. They can't touch them. Excellent. Walter, I have to ask, how do you feel? This was your daughter. That can't be easy. How did I feel? I looked out my study window at the December morning, cold and clear. Like I did my job, I said finally. I examined the evidence. I documented the crime. I prevented further harm. That's what examiners do. We serve the truth, even when it's painful. You're handling this remarkably well. I handled worse things for 38 years. Dead bodies don't argue back, but they tell stories. Kimberly and Troy told their story too. I just made sure it got heard by the right people. That afternoon, while checking my mail, I found a letter from Patricia Jenkins, handwritten, on expensive stationery. Dear Walter, I don't know how to begin this letter except with the most sincere apology I can offer. What Troy attempted, what he convinced your daughter to help him with, is unconscionable. Donald and I raised him better than this, or at least we thought we did. We've withdrawn all financial support from their business ventures. They have 1 year to repay what we've already provided, with interest. After that, we're done. We can't enable this kind of behavior, even from our own son. More than anything, I want you to know that we had no idea. If we'd known what he was planning, we would have stopped it immediately. Using someone's grief, their loss, there's no excuse for that. Please take care of yourself, and if you need anything, witnesses, statements, anything for legal proceedings, Donald and I will provide them. With deepest regret, Patricia Jenkins, I folded the letter and set it aside. Patricia was a good woman. She'd raised a son who'd learned to hide his true nature well. That wasn't her fault. Sometimes people simply choose to become less than they could be. The next day, Kimberly showed up at my door. I saw her through the window before she knocked. She looked terrible, exhausted, hollow-eyed, diminished. The polished financial analyst facade was gone. This was just a 38-year-old woman whose world had collapsed. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Dad, she said, please, can we talk? We already talked, on the phone. Face to face, please, 5 minutes. I considered it. Looked at her. Really looked at her. Searching for the little girl who used to make up constellations. Was she still in there somewhere? 5 minutes, I said, on the porch. We sat in the cold December air. She wrapped her coat tighter. I waited. Troy says we should sue you, she began, for defamation, for illegal recording, for manipulation. And what do you say? She was quiet for a long moment. I say we'd lose. And I say maybe we deserve to. That surprised me. First honest thing she'd said in months. Our business is collapsing, she continued. Troy's parents cut us off. The bank is calling in our loans. We're going to lose everything. Yes, I said simply. You could help us. $50,000 now instead of conditionally. It wouldn't solve everything, but it would buy us time. No? Dad, no, Kimberly. You don't get to manipulate your way out of consequences. You want that money? Earn it. Get therapy. Work on yourself. Prove you've changed. Or don't. And live with your choices. Her jaw tightened. I saw the anger flash. You recorded us for 9 weeks. You set us up. You trapped us. I documented attempted theft. There's a difference. We were desperate. So was I said quietly. My wife had just died. I was grieving, vulnerable, and instead of supporting me, you tried to rob me. So yes, I protected myself. With evidence. With truth. With the law. She stood abruptly. This isn't over. Yes, it is. I met her eyes. It's been over since you ambushed me at your mother's funeral. You just didn't know it yet. She left. I watched her drive away in her Audi, probably a lease they couldn't afford anymore. Gone was the confident woman who'd walked into Martinez's office expecting to inherit a fortune. In her place was someone facing reality for maybe the first time in years. I went back inside, back to my telescope. Jupiter was rising now, bright in the early evening sky, the great red spot visible through the lens, storm raging for centuries, constant, unchanged. My phone buzzed, text message from Troy. You think you won? But this isn't over. I'll find a way to fight this. I deleted it without responding. He was desperate now, dangerous maybe, but also powerless. The recordings were legal. The trust was filed. His parents had abandoned him. He had no weapons left except empty threats. And I'd faced worse threats in morgues at 3 a.m, examining evidence that led to killers. Troy Jenkins didn't scare me. Nothing did anymore. 3 days after the revelation, Troy made his move. I was at the grocery store, mundane Saturday morning errands, when my phone rang. Martinez. Walter, we have a problem. Troy filed an emergency petition claiming you're mentally incompetent and that the recordings were made under duress. He's asking the judge to void the trust and grant him emergency conservatorship. I stopped in the produce section holding a bag of apples. On what grounds? Claims you're suffering from grief-induced dementia, that you were manipulated by me into creating a fraudulent estate plan, that the recordings are fabricated. Can he do that? He can try. Judge Carlson is reviewing the petition. We have a hearing scheduled for Tuesday morning. You'll need to appear and demonstrate competency. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not fear, calculation. Troy was adapting, fighting back, using the legal system as a weapon, just like I had. What do we need? I asked. Medical evaluation, psychiatric assessment showing you're of sound mind, character witnesses, and we'll bring the recordings, of course. The metadata will prove they weren't fabricated. I'll be there Tuesday. Monday morning, I drove to a medical clinic Martinez had recommended. Dr. Sarah Chen, neuropsychologist, specialist in elder competency evaluations. She was thorough. Memory tests, cognitive assessments, problem-solving exercises, 2 hours of evaluation that reminded me uncomfortably of being examined rather than examining. Mr. Harrison, she said finally, you score in the 95th percentile for your age group. Memory excellent. Reasoning exceptional. Decision-making capacity unimpaired. You're one of the most mentally sharp 67-year-olds I've assessed. Will you testify to that? Absolutely. What your son-in-law is attempting, claiming sudden incompetence after you protected yourself from exploitation, that's not just wrong. It's offensive to actual victims of dementia. I thanked her and left with her written evaluation. One weapon secured. That evening, Marcus from the astronomy club called. Walter, I heard something disturbing. A man came to the club asking questions about you. Said he was concerned about your mental state. Asked if we'd noticed any confusion or memory problems. What did you tell him? That you're one of the sharpest people I know, that you can calculate orbital mechanics in your head, that whoever he was working for should find a better use of their time. Troy was casting a wide net, trying to build a case, looking for anyone who might say I seemed confused or diminished. He wouldn't find it, but the attempt showed sophistication. He wasn't just angry, he was strategic. Tuesday morning arrived cold and bright. I wore my good suit, the same one I'd worn to Ellen's funeral, to the revelation at Martinez's office. It felt like a uniform now, armor for battle. The courthouse was downtown, old building with marble floors and that peculiar echo that all government buildings have. Martinez met me in the lobby. Troy will be there with an attorney, he warned. Probably someone his father recommended before cutting him off. They'll argue that you showed signs of confusion, that I took advantage, that the recordings are suspect. Our job is to demonstrate otherwise. I've been demonstrating competency for 67 years. I think I can manage one more time. Judge Carlson's courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, high ceilings, American flag in the corner. Troy sat at one table with a lawyer who looked expensive and annoyed. Kimberly was conspicuously absent. We took our seats. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor, looked over the paperwork. "This is a petition for emergency conservatorship," she began, "filed by Mr. Troy Jenkins regarding Mr. Walter Harrison. Mr. Jenkins claims Mr. Harrison is mentally incompetent and was manipulated into creating a fraudulent estate plan. Mr. Martinez, your response?" Martinez stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Harrison is demonstrably competent. We have a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation completed 2 days ago showing he scores in the 95th percentile for cognitive function in his age group. Additionally, Mr. Harrison spent 38 years as a forensic medical examiner, a position requiring exceptional analytical skills and sound judgment. The real issue here isn't Mr. Harrison's competence. It's Mr. Jenkins's displeasure that Mr. Harrison protected himself from financial exploitation." Troy's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Jenkins is concerned about his father-in-law's well-being. After the death of his wife, Mr. Harrison became increasingly paranoid and suspicious. He secretly recorded family conversations, accused his own daughter of theft, and created an estate plan that excludes his only child. These aren't the actions of someone thinking clearly. They're the actions of someone protecting themselves," Martinez countered. "And I'll note that in Oregon, recording conversations you're part of is completely legal. Mr. Harrison didn't secretly record anything. He documented attempted coercion. There's a significant difference." Judge Carlson held up a hand. "I'd like to hear from Mr. Harrison directly. Mr. Harrison, please approach." I stood and walked to the witness stand, raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth, something I'd done hundreds of times in criminal cases. This felt strangely similar. "Mr. Harrison," Judge Carlson said, "tell me about the recordings. Why did you make them?" "Your Honor, after my wife's funeral, my daughter and son-in-law attempted to pressure me into signing away control of my assets. I'm a forensic examiner by training. I know how predators work. I recognize the pattern. So I did what I've always done. I documented the evidence." "And you made these recordings without their knowledge?" "I made them as a participant in conversations that were taking place in my own home. Oregon is a one-party consent state. I broke no laws. Why not simply ask them to leave? Because I wanted to understand the full scope of what they were planning. In forensic investigation, you don't stop gathering evidence at the first indicator. You build the complete case." Judge Carlson studied me for a long moment. "Mr. Harrison, can you tell me what day it is?" "Tuesday, December 16th, 2025. "Who is the current president?" I answered. She asked more questions. Memory, orientation, reasoning, all the standard competency tests. I'd administered similar assessments in mental health cases during my career. I knew exactly what she was looking for. After 10 minutes, she nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. You may step down. Dr. Chen, you're next." Dr. Chen testified about my evaluation. Thorough, professional, unimpeachable. She walked through test results, scoring percentiles, comparative analyses, I watched Troy's lawyer's face grow tighter with each statement. In your professional opinion, Judge Carlson asked, is Mr. Harrison capable of making sound financial decisions? Absolutely. He demonstrated exceptional cognitive function, clear reasoning, and appropriate emotional regulation. There's no indication of dementia, confusion, or impaired judgment. Martinez presented the recordings next. Not all 9 weeks, just key excerpts. Played through the courtroom speakers. Troy's voice, he's too broken to deal with this. Kimberly's voice, we'll have control of the assets. Troy again, the old man's weakening. Judge Carlson's expression didn't change, but I saw her make a note. Troy's lawyer tried to argue the recordings were manipulated. Martinez produced the metadata, timestamps, file properties, technical verification, everything authenticated. Your Honor, Troy's lawyer said, even if the recordings are genuine, they show family members trying to help an elderly man manage his affairs. Perhaps their phrasing was insensitive, but their intent was protective. Protective, Martinez's voice had an edge now. They calculated his net worth down to the dollar. They planned to sell his house within a month. They discussed his assisted living placement while he was still grieving his wife. That's not protection. That's predation. Judge Carlson raised her hand again. I've heard enough. Mr. Jenkins, please stand. Troy stood. He looked smaller somehow, less polished. The expensive suit couldn't hide the desperation underneath. Mr. Jenkins, Judge Carlson said, I've reviewed all the evidence. Mr. Harrison is clearly competent. The recordings are legal and authentic. Your petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm noting in the record that this appears to be a retaliatory filing, following Mr. Harrison's legitimate protection of his assets from what Oregon law defines as potential elder financial abuse. Troy's face went through several colors, red, white, something gray. If Mr. Harrison chose to pursue charges under Oregon's elder abuse statutes, Judge Carlson continued, these proceedings would provide substantial evidence. I suggest you consider yourself fortunate he's shown restraint. This court is adjourned. The gavel hit. Troy's lawyer immediately started packing his briefcase. Troy just stood there, frozen. His last weapon, the legal system, had failed him. He had nothing left. Martinez and I walked out together. The courthouse steps were wet from morning rain. That went better than expected, Martinez said, because I am competent, because the evidence was solid, because Troy overreached. He'll probably try something else. People like him don't stop. Let him try. I felt the weight of the recorder in my pocket, still carrying it, still ready. I documented everything for 9 weeks. I can document more if needed. We parted ways. I drove home through Portland traffic, thinking about Troy's face when the judge denied his petition, the desperation, the calculation, the realization that his schemes had backfired completely. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Walter, Troy's voice, tight, controlled. We need to talk. We have nothing to discuss. I made mistakes, I admit that. But you don't understand the pressure we were under. The debt, the business failing. We were desperate. I understand desperation fine. It doesn't excuse theft. I'm offering you a deal. Kimberly and I will sign statements acknowledging what we did. We'll agree to never contest your estate. In exchange, you give us $75,000. Help us get out from under the worst of the debt. I laughed. Actually laughed. You just tried to have me declared incompetent so you could steal everything. Now you want $75,000? It's better than what you're offering Kimberly. $50,000 conditionally. That's an insult. That's mercy. More than you deserve. Walter, no. The answer is no. You want money? Earn it. You want reconciliation? Start by accepting responsibility without demanding payment. Until then, we're done. I hung up. He called back immediately. I blocked the number. The house was quiet that night. Just me and the telescope and the December sky. Saturn rising in the east. Rings perfectly aligned. I thought about Ellen. About what she'd say about all this. She'd probably smile that knowing smile and say something like, I told you so. 2 squeezes. Warning. Always warning. She'd seen it before I did. The change in Kimberly, the influence of Troy, the slow erosion of family into transaction. But she'd also taught me patience. taught me to wait for the right moment, to observe carefully before acting. 9 weeks of observation had protected everything we'd built together, our home, our savings, our values. And that, I thought, adjusting the telescope's focus, was worth more than any amount of money could ever be. Troy and Kimberly had gambled on my weakness. They'd lost everything on that bet, and I'd won by simply refusing to be the victim they assumed I was. The examiner's creed: observe, document, report the truth. I'd followed it for 38 years in morgues and crime scenes. Following it one more time in my own home had saved everything that mattered. 2 days after Troy's failed petition, the real collapse began. I was at the astronomy club when Marcus pulled me aside. That man who was asking about you, he came back, offered me $500 to say you'd seem confused. What did you do? Told him to leave before I called the police. Marcus frowned. Walter, what's going on? Desperation, I said simply. People trying to rewrite history when the truth doesn't serve them. Well, he's gone now, but thought you should know. Troy was scrambling, trying to manufacture evidence, bribing witnesses. The behavior of someone watching their world disintegrate and grasping at anything to stop it. When I got home, there was a voicemail from Martinez. Walter, call me. It's about Troy's parents. I called back immediately. What happened? Donald and Patricia Jenkins formally notified Troy and Kimberly that they're terminating all business funding. The $180,000 that was scheduled for next month, canceled. More than that, they're demanding full repayment of previous investments within 1 year, with 7% interest. That comes to roughly $203,000. I did the math. Troy and Kimberly's startup debt, $340,000, plus Donald's demand, $203,000. Total, $543,000 in obligations, with zero income and a failing business. They'll have to declare bankruptcy, I said, almost certainly. But there's more. Patricia sent me a copy of a letter she's sending to Kimberly. She wanted me to see it first, make sure it couldn't be construed as witness tampering. I'm forwarding it to you. The email arrived minutes later. I opened the attachment. Dear Kimberly, I'm writing this as a mother, not as your husband's mother, as someone who understands what it means to watch your child make terrible choices. What you and Troy attempted, exploiting your father's grief, planning to steal his life's work, there's no excuse for that. None. I don't care how much debt you have or how desperate you feel. You crossed a line that should never be crossed. But unlike Troy, I believe you might still have a conscience. I saw your face in that conference room when the recordings played. I saw shame there. Troy only showed anger, so I'm telling you this. Get away from him. Whatever hold he has over you, break it. Go to therapy. Face what you've done. And maybe, you can salvage something of the person you used to be. Your father left you a path back. $50,000 conditional on personal growth. That's more than my son left you. He left you nothing but debt and legal liability. Choose wisely. This is probably your last chance. Patricia, I read it twice. Patricia had seen the same thing I'd wondered about, whether Kimberly was redeemable or whether Troy had corrupted her completely. That afternoon I learned the answer. My phone rang. Kimberly. I'd stopped blocking her calls, curious to see what would happen. Dad, her voice was different, harder. We need to talk. Now, I'm coming over. No, you're not. This is my house. You lost access to it when you tried to steal it. Fine. Meet me at the coffee shop on Hawthorne. 1 hour. She hung up before I could refuse. But curiosity won. I went. Kimberly was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table. She looked worse than before, exhausted, hollowed out, wearing yesterday's clothes. The polished facade had completely crumbled. Troy's parents called, she said without preamble, demanding $200,000. The bank's foreclosing on our loans. We're going to lose everything. Yes, I said simply. This is your fault. I almost laughed. My fault? I protected myself from theft. You're facing consequences of your own actions. You set us up. You manipulated the situation. I documented reality. There's a difference. She leaned forward, desperation bright in her eyes. Dad, please. 50,000 now, not conditional. Just now. It won't solve everything, but it gives us breathing room. No, I'm your daughter. You stopped being my daughter when you tried to rob me at your mother's funeral. The words came out colder than intended. True, though. You made your choice, Kimberly. You chose Troy. You chose greed. You chose to see me as an obstacle instead of a person. Those choices have consequences. Troy said you'd say that. He said you're punishing us. Troy would say that. It lets him avoid responsibility. I stood to leave. But I'm not punishing you. I'm just not saving you. There's a difference. If you don't help us, the business dies. Troy says we'll have to declare bankruptcy. We'll lose our apartment, everything. Then you'll rebuild, like adults, like I did when I was starting out. I looked at her one final time. Patricia sent you a letter. Did you read it? Something flickered across her face. Guilt? Anger? I read it. She thinks you're redeemable. That you still have a conscience buried under all this. I paused. I'm not sure I agree. But the conditional 50,000 stands. Therapy. Personal growth. Demonstrated change. That's the only deal available. And if I choose Troy? Then you choose debt, bankruptcy, and whatever comes after. Your decision. I walked out. Behind me, I heard her start crying. Real tears this time. The sound of someone finally understanding that actions have consequences, and charm can't erase them. That evening, Martinez called again. Interesting development. Troy and Kimberly's startup officially dissolved this afternoon. Filed for bankruptcy protection. Chapter 11. That was fast. It gets better. The bank filed a lien against their personal assets. They'll be lucky to keep their car. And I received a message from Kimberly's email. She wants to know the specific requirements for the conditional 50,000. She's considering it? Seems like it. She asked about therapy options, timeline for demonstrating growth, what reconciliation means in practical terms. Very detailed questions. What did you tell her? The truth. 6 months minimum therapy. Written documentation of progress. Family counseling, including you, if you're willing. Demonstrated financial responsibility. And a sincere, sustained effort at rebuilding trust. No guarantees, but if she genuinely changes, the money's there. And Troy? No mention of him in her email. Interesting, don't you think? Very interesting. Either Kimberly was finally seeing clearly, or she was playing a longer game. Time would tell. That night, I couldn't sleep. Too much had happened. Too much resolution, too fast. I went to my study, to the telescope. The winter sky was crystalline clear. Jupiter hung in the east, great red spot visible through the lens. My phone buzzed. Text message. Unknown number. This isn't over, Walter. You think you won, but you destroyed my life. My business. My marriage. There will be consequences. Troy, still fighting, still refusing to accept responsibility. I deleted the message without responding. Let him rage. His threats were empty now. No money, no support, no credibility. Just a desperate man watching everything collapse and blaming everyone except himself. Another message, different number. Kimberly. Dad, I read Patricia's letter again, and I've been thinking. About everything. About who I became. I don't know if I can fix this, but I want to try. I filed for separation from Troy today. I'm moving out. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I'm going to therapy. Starting next week. No conditions. Just because I need to. Maybe in a year or two we can talk. Really talk. I love you. I'm sorry. Kay, I read it 3 times. Looking for manipulation, for the angle, for the trap. I couldn't find one. Maybe it was genuine. Maybe Kimberly had finally hit bottom hard enough to bounce back up. Maybe Patricia's letter had penetrated where mine couldn't, or maybe this was another scheme. Time would tell. It always did. I saved the message but didn't respond. Not yet. If she was serious, she'd understand why. If she wasn't, my silence wouldn't matter anyway. The next morning, I received a call from the Cancer Research Foundation, the one Ellen and I had supported for years, the one that would inherit most of my estate. Mr. Harrison, we wanted to thank you personally for the substantial bequest you've designated. When Mr. Martinez contacted us about the Ellen Harrison Memorial Fund, we were deeply moved. My wife would have wanted it, I said simply. We'd like to invite you to our annual gala as a founding donor of the Memorial Fund. Would you consider attending? I thought about Ellen, about the 2 years we'd spent fighting cancer together, about the promise I'd made to her that her death would mean something. "I'll be there," I said. That afternoon, Marcus called from the astronomy club. "Walter, we're having an observation event next week. Comet passing through. Best viewing in a decade. You should come." "I'll be there," I said again. Life was reasserting itself, moving forward. The drama with Troy and Kimberly was fading into background noise. They'd deal with their bankruptcy, their separation, their consequences, with or without me. I'd done what I needed to do. Protected myself. Protected Ellen's legacy. Documented the truth. The examiner's job was complete. Now I could return to being just Walter Harrison, 67 years old, retired, living in Portland, looking at stars and remembering what mattered. Justice had been served. Not with anger, not with cruelty, just with truth, presented clearly at exactly the right moment to exactly the right people. And that, I thought, was the best revenge of all. 2 weeks later, everything had settled into a new normal. Troy and Kimberly moved out of their apartment. Couldn't afford the rent after the bankruptcy. Last I heard, Troy was living with a friend, doing gig work, still bitter, still blaming everyone except himself. Some people never learn. I didn't lose sleep over it. Kimberly surprised me. She actually went to therapy, sent me proof, not asking for anything, just showing she'd followed through. The therapist's name, the appointment confirmations, a brief note saying she was working through things. I acknowledged it with a simple, "Good." Nothing more. Not yet. The 123 missed calls eventually stopped. The phone went quiet. Peace returned. I spent my days how I'd always planned to spend retirement, at the telescope, at the astronomy club, visiting the Cancer Research Foundation that now bore Ellen's name. Simple pleasures, honest work. One evening, sitting in my study with Saturn perfectly framed in the telescope's lens, I pulled out the recorder, one final time, held it in my hands. 9 weeks of evidence compressed into one small device. The truth that had saved everything. I thought about Troy's face when he realized I'd documented everything. The shock, the panic, the desperate scrambling. It was better than any movie, better than anything Hollywood could script. Real consequences for real actions. I thought about Kimberly's transformation, whether it was genuine or performative. Time would tell. Maybe in a year or two we'd talk, maybe not. Either way, I'd left the door open. That was enough. I thought about Ellen, about her hand squeezes. 2 for warning. She'd known before I did. And now, months after her death, I'd honored her memory by refusing to let greed destroy what we'd built together. Looking at the photo of us on my desk, her smile, my arm around her shoulders, I spoke aloud to the empty room. "Ellen, you'd be proud. I didn't let them destroy everything we built together." I turned back to the telescope. Jupiter was rising now, brilliant in the winter sky, the great red spot rotating slowly, constant, mathematical. True. Justice achieved, dignity preserved, life moving forward. The examiner had done his job, and Walter Harrison could finally rest. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.